Sorry about that, everybody. Let's continue assignment number 7. Where I was, Dud was just realizing that this man is hypnotizing him, and I was reminded of course, Mina and Van Helsing and Dracula and the link of hypnotism between everybody. Let's continue. He'd put you to sleep and make you do all kinds of comical things, act like a chicken or run around like a dog or tell what happened at the birthday party you had when you were 6. He hypnotized old Reggie Sawyer, and God, didn't we laugh? Does it perhaps inconvenience you in other ways? No. Well, he looked into the eyes, fascinated. Come, the old party's voice. The old party's voice controlled gently. We are friends, are we not? Speak to me. Tell me. Well, girls, girls. Of course, the old party said soothingly. The girls laugh at you, do they not? They have no knowing of your manhood, of your strength. That's right, Dud whispered. They laugh. She laughs. Who is she? Ruthie Crockett. She. The thought flew away. He let it. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except this peace, this cool and complete peace. She makes the jokes, perhaps, snickers behind her hand, nudges her friends when you pass. Yes, but you want her, the voice insisted. Is it not so? Oh, yes. You shall have her. I am sure of it. Something pleasant about this. Far away, he seemed to hear sweet voices singing foul words, silver chimes, white faces, Ruthie Crockett's voice. He could almost see her, hand cupping her titties, making them bulge into the V of her cardigan sweater, in ripe white half globes, whispering, kiss them, Dud, bite them, suck them. It was like drowning in the old man's red-rimmed eyes. As the stranger came closer, Dud understood everything and welcomed it. And when the pain came, it was sweet as silver, as green as still water at dark fathoms. 9. His hand was unsteady, and instead of gripping the bottle, the fingers knocked it off the desk and to the carpet with a heavy thump, where it lay gurgling good scotch into the green nap. Shit, said Father Donald Callahan, and reached down to pick it up before all was lost. There was, in fact, not much to lose. He set what was left on the desk again, well back from the edge, and wandered into the kitchen to look for a rag under the sink and a bottle of cleaning fluid. It would never do to let Miss Curlis find a patch of spilled scotch by the leg of his study desk. Her kind, pitying looks were too hard to take on the long, grainy mornings when you were feeling a little low. Hungover, you mean? Yes, hungover. Very good. Let's have a little truth around here, by all means. Know the truth, and it will set you free. Bully for the truth. He found a bottle of something called Evap, which was not too far from the sound of violent regurgitation. Evap, croaked the old drunk, simultaneously crapping himself and blowing lunch, and took it back to the study. He was not weaving at all. Hardly at all. Watch this, ossifer. I'm going to walk right up this white line to the stoplight. Callahan was an imposing 53. His hair was silvery, his eyes a direct blue, now threaded with tiny snaps of red, surrounded by Irish laugh wrinkles, his mouth firm, his slightly cleft chin firmer still. Some mornings, looking at himself in the mirror, he thought that when he reached 60, he would throw over the priesthood, go to Hollywood, and get a job playing Spencer Tracy. Father Flanagan, where are you when we need you, he muttered, and hunkered down by the stain. He squinted, read the instructions on the label of the bottle, and poured 2 capfuls of Evap onto the stain. The patch immediately turned white and began to bubble. Callahan viewed this with some alarm and consulted the label again. For really tough stains, he read aloud in the rich, rolling voice that had made him so welcome in this parish after the long, denture-clicking peregrinations of poor old Father Hume, allowed to set for 7 to 10 minutes. He went over to the study window, which fronted on Elm Street and St. Andrews on the far side. Well, he thought, here I am, Sunday night and drunk again. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. If you went slow and if he continued to work on his long, solitary evenings, Father Callahan worked on his notes. On his long, solitary evenings, Father Callahan worked on his notes. He had been working on the notes for nearly 7 years, supposedly for a book on the Catholic Church in New England. But he suspected now and then the book would never be written. In point of fact, the notes and his drinking problem had begun at the same time. Genesis 1. In the beginning, there was scotch, and Father Callahan said, let there be notes. You were hardly aware of the slow growth of drunkenness. You could educate your hands not to be aware of the bottle's lessening weight. It has been at least 1 day since my last confession. It was 11:30, and looking out the window, he saw uniform darkness, broken only by the spotlight circle of the streetlight in front of the church. At any moment, Fred Astaire would dance into it, wearing a top hat, tails, spats, and white shoes, twirling a cane. He is met by Ginger Rogers. They waltzed to the tune of I Got Them Old Cosmic Evap Blues Again. He leaned his forehead against the glass, allowing the handsome face that had been, in some measure at least, his curse sag into drawn lines of distracted weariness. I'm a drunk and I'm a lousy priest, Father. With his eyes closed, he could see the darkness of the confessional booth, could feel his fingers sliding back the window and rolling up the shade on all the secrets of the human heart, could smell varnish and old velvet from the kneeling benches and the sweat of old men, could taste alkali traces in his saliva. Bless me, Father. I broke my brother's wagon. I hit my wife. I peeked in Miss Sawyer's window when she was undressing. I lied. I cheated. I have lustful thoughts. I, for I have sinned. He opened his eyes, and Fred Astaire had not appeared yet. On the stroke of midnight, perhaps. His town was asleep. Except, he glanced up. Yes, the lights were on up there. He thought of the Bowie girl. No, McDougal. Her name was McDougal now, saying in her breathy little voice that she had hit her baby, and when he asked her how often, he could sense, could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind, making a dozen times 5 or 100 a dozen. Sad excuse for a human being. He had baptized that baby. Randall Fratis McDougal, conceived in the backseat of Royce McDougal's car, probably during the second feature of a drive-in double bill. Tiny, screaming little thing. He wondered if she knew or guessed that he would like to reach through the little window with both hands and grasp the soul on the other side as it fluttered and twisted and squeeze it until it screamed. Your penance is 6 head knocks and a good swift kick in the ass. Go your way and sin no more. Dull, he said. There was more than dullness in the confessional. It was not that by itself that had sickened him or propelled him toward that always widening club, associated Catholic priests of the bottle and knights of the cutty sark. It was the steady, dead, onrushing engine of the church, bearing down all petty sins on its endless shuttle to heaven. It was the ritualistic acknowledgement of evil by a church now more concerned with social evils. Atonement told in beads for elderly ladies whose parents had spoken European tongues. It was the actual presence of evil in the confessional, as real as the smell of old velvet. But it was a mindless, moronic evil from which there was no mercy or reprieve. The fist crashing into the baby's face, the tire cut open with a jackknife, the barroom brawl, the insertion of razor blades into Halloween apples, the constant vapid qualifiers which the human mind, in all its labyrinthine twists and turns, is able to spew forth. Gentlemen, better prisons will cure this. Better cops, better social service agencies, better birth control, better sterilization techniques, better abortions. Gentlemen, if we rip this fetus from the womb in a bloody tangle of unformed arms and legs, it will never grow up to beat an old lady to death with a hammer. Ladies, if we strap this man into a specially wired chair and fry him like a pork chop in a microwave oven, he will never have an opportunity to torture any more boys to death. Countrymen, if this eugenics bill is passed, I can guarantee you that never again. Shit. The truth of his condition had been becoming clearer and clearer to him for some time now, perhaps for as long as 3 years. It had gained clarity and resolution like an out-of-focus motion picture being adjusted until every line is sharp and defined. He had been pining for a challenge. The new priests had theirs: racial discrimination, women's liberation, even gay liberation, poverty, insanity, illegality. They made him uncomfortable. The only socially conscious priests he felt at ease with were the ones who had been militantly opposed to the war in Vietnam. Now that their cause had become obsolete, they sat around and discussed marches and rallies the way old married couples discuss their honeymoons or their first train rides. But Callahan was neither a new priest nor an old one. He found himself cast in the role of a traditionalist who can no longer even trust his basic postulates. He wanted to lead a division in the army of who? God, right, goodness. They were names for the same thing, into a battle against evil. He wanted issues and battle lines, and never mind standing in the cold outside supermarkets handing out leaflets about the lettuce boycott or the grape strike. He wanted to see evil with its cerements of I just want to point something out. He's sitting here talking about how he doesn't like the fight that the Catholic Church has right now, what he thinks are social justice issues. He says he wants to fight true evil, like actual murdering and whatnot. This guy has no idea about the foreshadowing he's setting himself up for right now, because he's about to find true evil in its absolute basic form. Very interesting. I just wanted to point that out. He wanted to see evil with its cerements of deception cast aside, with every feature of its visage clear. Check that out. I want to remind him of this when he does. He wanted to see evil with its cerements of deception cast aside. In other words, he wants to see the face of evil. He doesn't want to see anybody like hiding from him or masking their evil, with every feature of his visage clear. Later, if he does get to see it, let's see if he still wants to see it. He wanted to slug it out toe-to-toe with evil, like Muhammad Ali against Joe Frazier, the Celtics against the Knicks, Jacob against the Angel. He wanted this struggle to be pure, unhindered by the politics that rode the back of every social issue like a deformed Siamese twin. He had wanted all this since he had wanted to be a priest, and that call had come to him at the age of 14, when he had been inflamed by the story of St. Stephen, the first Christian martyr who had been stoned to death and who had seen Christ at the moment of his death. Heaven was a dim attraction compared to that of fighting and perhaps perishing. in the service of the Lord. Remember that quote as well. Heaven was a dim attraction compared to that of fighting and perhaps perishing in the service of the Lord. We will see if he believes that sooner enough. Very quickly, too. But there were no battles. There were only skirmishes of vague resolution, and evil did not wear one face but many, and all of them were vacuous, and more often than not, the chin was slicked with drool. In fact, he was being forced to the conclusion that there was no evil in the world at all, but only evil, or perhaps evil. At moments like this, he suspected that Hitler had been nothing but a harried bureaucrat, and Satan himself a mental defective with a rudimentary sense of humor, the kind that finds feeding firecrackers wrapped in bread to seagulls unutterably funny. The great social, moral, and spiritual battles of the ages boiled down to Sandy McDougal slamming her snot-nosed kid in the corner, and the kid would grow up and slam his own kid in the corner. A world without end. Hallelujah, chunky peanut butter. Hail Mary, full of grace, help me win this stock car race. It was more than dull. It was terrifying in its consequences for any meaningful definition of life and perhaps of heaven. What there? An eternity of church bingo, amusement park rides, and celestial drag strips? He looked over at the clock on the wall. It was 6 minutes past midnight, and still no sign of Fred Astaire or Ginger Rogers, not even Mickey Rooney. But the evap had had time to set. Now he would vacuum it up, and Miss Curlis would not look at him with that expression of pity, and life would go on. Amen. Okay, part 1, The Marston House, chapter 7, Matt. 1. At the end of period 3 on Tuesday, Matt walked up to the office and Ben Mears was waiting there for him. Hi, Matt said. You're early. Ben stood up and shook hands. Family curse, I guess. Say, these kids aren't going to eat me, are they? Positive, Matt said. Come on. He was a little surprised. Ben had dressed in a nice-looking sport coat on a pair of gray double-knit slacks. Good shoes that looked as if they hadn't been worn much. Matt had had other literary types into his classes, and they were usually dressed in casual clothes or something downright weird. A year ago, he had asked a rather well-known female poet who had done a reading at the University of Maine at Portland if she would come in the following day to a class about poetry. She had shown up in pedal pushers and high heels. It seemed to be a subconscious way of saying, look at me, I've beaten the system in its own game. I come and go like the wind. His admirations for Ben went up a notch in comparison. After 36 plus years of teaching, he believed that nobody beat the system or won the game, and only suckers ever thought they were ahead. It's a nice building, Ben said, looking around as they walked down the hall. Hell of a lot different from where I went to high school. Most of the windows in that place look like loopholes. First mistake, Matt said. You must never call it a building. It's a plant. Blackboarders are visual aids, and the kids are homogeneous, mid-teen, coeducational student body. How wonderful for them, Ben said, grinning. It is, isn't it? Did you go to college, Ben? I tried, liberal arts, but everybody seemed to be playing an intellectual game of capture the flag. You too can find an axe and grind it, thus becoming known and loved. Also, I flunked out. When Conway's daughter sold, I was bucking cases of Coca-Cola onto delivery trucks. Tell the kids that. They'll be interested. You like teaching, Ben asked. Sure, I like it. It would have been a busted axle 40 years if I didn't. The late bell rang, echoing loudly in the corridor, which was empty now except for one loitering student who was wandering slowly past a painted arrow under a sign which read, Wood Shop. How's drugs here, Ben asked. All kinds, like every school in America. Ours is booze more than anything else. Not marijuana? I would consider pot a problem, and neither does the administration when it speaks off the record with a few knocks of Jim Beam under its belt. I happen to know that our guidance counselor, who is one of the best in his line, isn't averse to toking up and going to a movie. I tried it myself. The effect is fine, but it gives me acid indigestion. You have? Shh, Matt said. Big brother is listening everywhere. Besides, this is my room. Oh, boy. Don't be nervous, Matt said, and let him in. Good morning, folks, he said to the 20 or so students who were eyeing Ben closely. This is Mr. Ben Mears. 2. At first, Ben thought he had the wrong house. When Matt Burke invited him for supper, he was quite sure he had said the house was the small gray one after the red brick, but there was rock and roll music pouring from this one in a steady stream. He used a tarnished brass knocker, got no answer, and rapped again. This time the music was turned down, and a voice that was unmistakably Matt's yelled, "It's open, come on in." He did, looking around curiously. The front door opened directly on a small living room furnished an early American junk shop and dominated by an incredibly ancient Motorola TV. A KLH sound system with quad speakers was putting out the music. Oh, a KLH sound system with quad speakers was putting out the music. Matt came out of the kitchen, outfitted in a red and white checked apron. The odor of spaghetti sauce wandered out after him. Sorry about the noise, Matt said. I'm a little deaf. I turn it up. Good music. I've been a rock fan ever since Buddy Holly. Lovely music. Are you hungry? Yeah, Ben said. Thanks again for asking me. I've eaten out more since I came back to Salem's Lot than I have in the last 5 years, I guess. It's a friendly town. Hope you don't mind eating in the kitchen. An antique man came by a couple of months ago and offered me $200 for my dining room table. I haven't gotten around to getting another one. I don't mind. I'm a kitchen eater from a long line of kitchen eaters. The kitchen was astringently neat. On the small four-burner stove, a pot of spaghetti sauce simmered, and a colander full of spaghetti stood steaming. A small drop-leaf table was set with a couple of mismatched plates and glasses which had animated cartoon figures dancing around the rims. Jelly glasses, Ben thought with amusement. The last constraint of being a stranger dropped away, and he began to feel at home. There's bourbon, rye, and vodka in the cupboard over the sink, Matt said, pointing. There's some mixers in the fridge. Nothing too fancy, I'm afraid. Bourbon and tap water will do for me. Go to it. I'm going to serve this mess up. Mixing his drink, Ben said, I liked your kids. They asked good questions. Tough, but good. Like, where do you get your ideas, Matt asked, mimicking Ruthie Crockett's sexy little girl lisp. She's quite a piece. She is indeed. There's a bottle of Lancers in the icebox behind the pineapple chunks. I got it special. Say, you shouldn't. Oh, come on, Ben. We hardly see best-selling authors in the lot every day. That's a little extravagant. Ben finished the rest of his drink, took a plate of spaghetti from Matt, ladled sauce over it, and twirled a forkful against his spoon. Fantastic, he said. Mamma mia. But of course, Matt said. Ben looked down at his plate, which had emptied with amazing rapidity. He wiped his mouth a little guiltily. More? Half a plate if it's okay. It's great spaghetti. Matt brought him a whole plate. If we don't eat it, my cat will. He's a miserable animal. Weighs 20 pounds and waddles to his dish. Lord, how did I miss him? Matt smiled. He's cruising. Is your new book a novel? A fictionalized sort of thing, Ben said. To be honest, I'm writing it for money. Art is wonderful, but just once I'd like to pull a big number out of the hat. What are the prospects? Murky, Ben said. All right, ladies and gentlemen. That is the end for me. I'm going to go up really quick to remind you what chapter we are in, what number we are in. We are in 2. So we are in, ladies and gentlemen, this is where you're going to pick it up so you can finish this assignment. We are now in part 1, The Marston House, chapter 7, Matt, and we are in part 2. So we're right down in the middle of that somewhere where they're in the middle of their dinner, enjoying spaghetti and chatting it up. We have Matt and Ben. I wanted to point something out, but I will wait until next time. Everybody have a lovely day. I will see you next time.